Podcast. Welcome back to it. It is the Sunday radio show, and we are going to go to our next guest. They are going to join us live. We are going to get in here our next guest. I got to get them all in here, and we will see what happens. We are going to go to them. The Ghosts of Sunset will join us here in just a few. And we will see what happens here. I guess I kind of got to have the microphone right there. So
all right. Man, I think I'm in.
I think we've got the Ghosts of Sunset with us. Can you guys hear us?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us?
Fantastic. Yes, indeed. So tell us a little bit about the Ghosts of Sunset and how you guys got started as a group.
Well, Todd, you want to field that question?
No, go ahead. It was your idea. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. We were I was out running one day, jogging of all things, and I started thinking about 80s hair bands because that's the stuff I'm into, you know. But no one had really. Yeah, I'm sure you've watched like what is it? Behind the Music and stuff like that. You know, people love that stuff. And so I started thinking, like, nobody's ever really done a concept album about that kind of stuff. About, you know, there's a lot that went into a band like Poison or Motley or anything, you know, getting where they ended up. So I got done running. I called Todd. I said, hey, man, I'm thinking about an idea about this EP. And so Todd took it over. And the next thing I knew, within 24 hours, he had the first song of Ghosts of Sunset. And we were off and running. We were going to make an EP, a concept EP.
That's fantastic.
And that's how the whole thing started.
That is fantastic. So
yeah, man.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
I have a terrible lag on my end. I'm actually hearing my voice
fine.
back.
You're fine. You're fine. I think it's just the fact technology is against everyone today. So tell us a little bit about the name of the band. How the name of the band come about?
We were looking for, you know, we kicked around a couple different names, and Ghosts of Sunset, we thought, kind of played the most homage to, first of all, that hair metal scene, quote unquote, that I was talking about. But also, you know, the Sunset Strip was home to, you know, everything from the Doors and the Byrds and the Flying Burrito Brothers and, you know, going back, you know, Sammy, you know, Frank, Dean, it was all of that. So we liked the Ghosts of Sunset as kind of a, you know, an homage to all the Sunset Strip scene and all the stuff that was raised up there, you know?
Fantastic. So this whole thing that you guys are doing, who are some of your musical heroes and influences?
Go ahead, Todd.
Well, my favorite were, first it was the Police that I really got into, and then it was Kiss, and then Poison made me want to be rock stars.
Fantastic.
So I really got into the hair metal scene with Poison and Warrant and Enough's Enough.
And I liked all that stuff too. You know, growing up, the Beatles, you know, you hear that with, you know, so many people, but the Beatles were a big deal to me, man. You know, I grew up at a time in the 70s, you know, the Beatles had already broken up, but at that time there was a Beatle cartoon on TV, you know, and there was,
that's awesome.
I just liked the whole idea, you know, the concept of these four, of course the Beatles cartoon was full of hijinks and adventures, right? Kind of what the Monkees ended up doing, you know, the Monkees kind of played that same thing, but it was really the Beatles for me. That was my first, who I wanted to be. You know, they covered a lot of ground for me musically. And then like Todd, you know, I got into the 80s stuff too. We're children of the 80s, and that was everything from, you know, for me, Billy Squier, Sammy Hagar, Eldo Nova, Cheap Trick, into what we came to know as hair metal, you know, the Motley Crues and Quiet Riots and Guns N' Roses and Enough's Enough. And all that kind of stuff.
That's amazing. So, why do you think that hair metal and some of this stuff is still popular nowadays, where there are some other genres of music that have just kind of fallen by the wayside?
First of all, I'm really grateful it is, not just for me, but as a fan of that music and having lived through, the grunge era. I remember, it was seeing a lot of those bands that used to top the charts rolling into town in a 15-passenger van and a trailer. You know what I mean? Where 3 years ago they played the local hockey arena and came in with 2 buses and 3 semis. So I'm grateful that there was a resurgence. But I think people just got, finally got to the point where it was okay to have a good time again, for lack of a better word. We went through that grunge thing where everything, if you weren't bummed out, something was wrong with you,
Yes.
And we have to remember too, the musicianship, truly those, back in the day, and I say this a lot, but when you were in a band like that, you had to be pretty good just to play cover tunes, because your cover tunes were Dokken and Rat. You had guitar players like Jakey Lee and George Lynch and Warren DeMartini. I mean, everyone was great. So there was a certain level of musicianship too that I think people have come to appreciate.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, you guys have put together a lot of great music here.
Thank you.
What is the latest album, and why should people go pick it up?
Go ahead, Todd.
Well, the latest album is going to be called No Saint in the City, and that's not coming out until February or March next year. But we have our EP, which is 6 songs titled Headed West, and that's out now. And that features a lot of guest musicians like Johnny Monaco from Enough's Enough, and Stacey Blades, who was in Rock's Gang, and Ellie Gunn. Who else is on it?
Brian Forsyth from Kix is on it. Tracy Guns. And people should pick it up, I think, because it's just like we all did when we were kids, right? You invited people over to your house to play records for them. Hey, I like this record. You got to come over and check it out. That's kind of where we're at with this band thing, is we're just sharing music we like. I mean, mind you, we made it up too. But we're just trying to share songs we like with people who are like-minded, and we have found this community, yourself included, supportive people who dig this kind of music still and are hungry for, we all love the classics in the genre, right? We all love Def Leppard and Motley and Bon Jovi, and we can go on and on, right? But there are still people out there who want to hear that genre of music maybe expanded upon, or maybe with some different subject matter than we had in the 80s. So that's why, if you love this genre of music, we are literally making music for you. We're not making music for the masses, obviously. It's not going to be, I don't think we're going to hit Taylor Swift levels anytime soon. Though that would be awesome, man. That would be great. So if that's on the table, I want to just go on record now to say I'm cool with that. But I don't know that that's going to happen, So what we're doing is just we found an audience, and we're cognizant of that audience in the sense of we want to make great songs. We want great songs. That's all we care about. But we want those folks who we found and now have become our friends. Fans seems like a strong word. Sometimes that seems silly, but they're just like us. So we're going, hey, here's a record we like. Check it out. It's no different than inviting them over to our parents' basement in 1987 to hear the new Faster Pussycat record.
That's fantastic. I think we interviewed Faster Pussycat at one point, and
cool.
It was it was kind of an interesting interview. So how did you guys end up getting some of these name guys and folks involved with this record?
it really, Todd is is really he was the forerunner of that. But it all started with the first song we wrote. I play guitar, Todd plays guitar. We play pretty much, all the instruments. But we were getting to the point where you wanted that guitar solo to really have that flavor of the era, right?
Yep.
And the way to do that was to seek out people who had that skill set. And that's how we did it. And we reached out to people like Johnny Monaco or Tracy Guns or Brian Forsythe from Kicks or whomever. And we had one qualification. It was like, if you like the song, we'd love to have you play on it. If you don't, there's no hard feelings. But we wanted people who were willing to give us, put their heart into that, however many bars of guitar solo or whatever. And I'll tell you, they all did it. They all really were open to it, and they liked the songs. And that was a big boost for Todd and I. We've written songs and been in bands together for 30 some years, but it was really nice when some of those guys that we had grown up on said, hey, this is a good song, and I can really pour myself into it.
That's awesome.
So
that is fantastic.
It was lucky. We were really lucky to have them.
That's pretty amazing that you were able to pull that off like that and get some of these names and they were enthusiastic about the whole thing.
Yeah, they really were. And I have to be honest too, I don't want to say lucky, but we kind of, as we were moving through the process, that's when this pandemic hit. So we also had the advantage of a lot of these folks were at home. They were off the road. They weren't touring.
Yep.
Some of those 80s bands aren't recording much anymore. They're legacy acts. So they have a catalog of music people want to hear. They don't necessarily have that push to make a ton of new music, although a lot of them do. So we caught them at the right time. They were home and available, and so we got, we hit at the right time.
Well, that's, any advantage you can get, I would take it.
Amen. We didn't plan this pandemic, but when you've been in the business as long as Todd and I have, you have to, when any advantage comes, you have to take it because they are few and far in between. I can assure you that.
Hey, I'll tell you, I think one of our most successful runs as far as interviews and things was during the pandemic because like I've told all sorts of people that I know in the porn industry, I'm like, they got nothing to do. They might as well talk to my dumbass. So,
all right.
It's
man, it's technology too. I mean, how cool to learn that we could do all of this the way we're doing it now, which seems, Skype or whatever seems normal now. But
yeah,
there was a time when it was like, you want me to do what? Record a guitar part and you're in Alaska and I'm in Michigan? How's that going to work?
Yes.
Now it's second nature. It's how music's made for the most part now.
Well, and I'll tell you, that is, you bring up an interesting point there. There's a lot of these music videos that I've seen that these people recorded everything over Skype or Zoom or whatever, and they pieced everything together somehow, and they've got this music.
Yep, that's exactly how it went. And I mean, Todd and I both have little home studios that, I say little home studios, but I look around me now and I go, God, I have the same stuff that, any studio might have,
Yes.
Both of us do. And I mean, again, Todd, please chime in. I'm talking way too much. But we got really lucky being able to know the technology. We were in front of the technology enough that when that pandemic hit, we were set up to work in this fashion. Wouldn't you agree with that, Todd?
I totally agree. I remember when we first started doing this, I had like the worst home recording thing ever. And we still pulled it off with like two of those songs that the first two songs that we came up with were on my crappiest home studio ever, and they still turned out really good. So now I've upped my so now it's a lot easier.
And we come from we've made records on tape. I mean, we've been around the scene that long. We were making records when everybody had to play their part perfectly, or you had to start again from the start. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so that is, I think anybody with a home computer now thinks, well, I've got a studio, now I have got my own studio, but there's something to be said for, having come up 30 plus years of doing this, remembering everything from, us recording on tape, to early days where we were stringing together 14 different cassette decks trying to make a multi-track recording in 1987. And you're going, or 88, whatever, you're going, how come this doesn't sound like Bon Jovi? It's because John Bon Jovi's not cutting his vocals on a Walkman,
Well, that too. We have got the Ghosts of Sunset with us today. They join us live here on our big broadcast, and they are fantastic. They understand, the music business, and one of the things that I always find amazing about some of these guys that are doing music and doing things now, like you said, there's all these guys that think that just because they have a computer means they got a studio. And
right.
Talk about piecing together your guys' studios, because I love that process. Each of you guys take me through that, how you piece together your stuff.
Sure. I start off, through the years, Todd and I started, like I said, literally, I wasn't making a joke. We literally strung multiple cassette decks together, and then we got into the 4-track cassettes and things like that. And nowadays, I have in my basement here at home, I've got an 18-in Pro Tools rig, so, and basically I've got, I've been playing music for 30 some years now, and I've acquired, I've got pretty much every vintage style amp you could want, and plugins and a vocal microphone, and to this day, we're still learning things about the process, how to fly parts in, how to line things up. But they're really, nowadays for a few $1,000s, you can set yourself up and really have a pro level studio. Back in the day, the hard things were, getting drums to sound good with microphones and
Yes.
outboard compressors. And I mean, it's just like radio, right? It's just like doing radio or podcasting or any of that sort of stuff. I still believe that if you get good in, you get out. Like, I don't think if you have the best home studio on earth and you're writing crappy songs, I don't think technology is going to get you through that. I think it starts out with good songs,
Well,
and,
I love the fact
that
that you guys have pieced all this stuff together. What was some of the things that you knew that you had to have when you started piecing all this together?
Todd?
Well, and like how I do it is, someone will write an idea, and then I'll put down the drum track through MIDI drums. And if we don't like a drum sound, we can just replace it with, like Drumagog, which if I don't like that snare sound, there's 800 more I can choose from. So we do that.
That's awesome.
Usually I'll play the bass, and then John will play guitar, or I'll play guitar, and then we just keep sending it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And we don't lose any audio quality because it's all WAV files. So and then we get to the final product, and we have somebody else mix it because we don't want that weight on our shoulders.
because we still want to be friends at the end of this whole thing. So we let someone else mix it, because if we learned anything over all these years, it's if you have 4 people who are so close to something that they had a functioning part in it, and you ask them what should be loudest, it's typically them. So but the digital thing, like Todd said, quality stays there, good in, good out, like I said, good gear, and the ability, we paid attention all those years ago when, some producer or engineer was miking up an amp. we listened when they were and went, hey man, what are you doing? Or why do you put it there? Or why did this happen?
Yes.
You know? So the modern, like I said, you know, you get your laptop and you go, hey, I've got a studio now, and that's great. And great stuff has come out of that. I'm not denying that at all. But there's also something to be said to, yeah, that's great. You have all this stuff, but you don't know where to put that microphone on a speaker, or you don't know what you're listening for. Yeah, you've got 800 snare drums, but you don't exactly know where you want that snare to set in a mix. Todd has such an ear that he can go, okay, I need this snare sound because it's going to occupy this sonic space, and it's going to work with the bass, and it won't clash with the guitars. And, you know, it's that kind of stuff that you really have to have some time to learn.
I think
that's what's important.
I think that's awesome.
I just think if it sounds cool, that's the one I go with.
Right. But, you know, that's the thing is you hear all those great records, and we all have for, you know, going, you know, be it Sgt. Pepper or be it, you know, Too Fast for Love by Motley Crue or whatever. You hear those things, and if you have the experience and been around it long enough and you like something there, you know somewhat how it was achieved, you know?
Right.
And then you can go to work and say, I mean, Todd and I, there's no denying we wear our influences on our sleeves, and we're more than comfortable to say, I mean, I've said flat out, hey man, let's make that part sound a little bit like Enough's Enough, or let's make that part, we'll go that heavy riff that's going to sound like old AC/DC, but I want that chorus big and lush like Enough's Enough would do. And then let's take 4 bars and make it Beatly. And Todd and I have been to, you know, making music long enough that we speak that language. We have enough mutual influences and similar tastes that when I go, hey man, that drum part should be more like, you know, like Dr. Feelgood, and let's make that guitar part, we'll bring that back, we'll make that more like a Tom Petty thing. And Todd knows exactly what I mean.
That's great. That's great.
It's a language. It's, you know, it's being able to speak the same language. That's why you can jam 4 or 5 fantastic musicians into a studio together, and you're baffled by why it doesn't sound great. They're all great players, but it doesn't sound great. It's because they're not speaking the same language. So, you know, that's go ahead, Todd.
Like some of these super groups never, like their songs aren't very, have all these great musicians.
I remember some of these, you know, just even talking about super groups from the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, they just thought, hey, let's stick these name guys together and see what the hell happens.
Yep. And sometimes it works, and you get, you know, you get anything from, you know, Cream to Mr. Big to whatever it might be, and sometimes it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, it sounds so disjointed because, you know, if you have four people in a room, the fifth element in there is chemistry. And that's something that you can never, you can have the nicest studio on earth, but you know, there's no computer plug-in for chemistry. That is something that, you know, Todd and I have achieved after, you know, being not just friends, but, you know, bandmates and for 30 plus years. You just can't, you know, they don't make a computer program that does that. If they do, that'd be awesome. I would use that too. Just like the Taylor Swift thing. I don't care. You give me whatever tools you got, I'll take it, you know?
So, once you guys get this album out there, what happens next? Do you guys try to tour, or what happens?
We've talked about touring. Touring is, you know, I think anyone will tell you touring, and certainly even before the pandemic, touring had changed even in my time and Todd's time of doing it. We have some other folds, you know, we have, since we're kind of 2 guys orchestrating this thing, we have to round out a lineup with some hired guns, which is doable. But also, and I hate to kind of burst a bubble, but, you know, I've been in the game and Todd's been in the game a long time, and we're kind of beyond sleeping on strangers' floors.
Yes.
I don't want to.
You know, and that's terrible to say. And every time I got, you know, friends and, you know, peers who are out touring and crushing and putting on phenomenal live shows, and I'm jealous. I mean, I'm jealous all the time. But then I hear, well, we drove 16 hours after we'd slept on a hardwood floor in the basement of this bar we played, and I'm like, that doesn't appeal to me. I mean, I don't need to fly, I don't need to fly to the gig or anything, and I don't need a tour bus, but I need a warm shower from time to time, and I don't want to wake up in someone's house, with their kids standing there going, is my dad around? I have to go to school, and I go, I don't know. I played the bar last night, man. I don't know your dad's name or whatever,
Yeah.
And we did that. I mean, we've done that in our day. There have been many times, that can't tell you the times that Todd and I slept in the van, or, you ended up not being able to afford a hotel room, and you opened the first aid kit and you got that reflective blanket out and you curled up under that for a few hours before you drove to the next town, But that doesn't hold a lot of appeal for me right now. So if we tour, we have to tour smart. We have to tour healthy, and we have to get the most bang for our buck. That means we really have to find the pockets where we're doing the best business and focus on those and build out from there,
Yeah, because I will have to say that this is something that I think a lot of people got taught during the whole pandemic thing, is they don't have to put up with the nonsense anymore.
No,
you don't have to, like you guys were saying. Okay, we don't have to worry about, okay, we're jumping in the van and we got to drive, 6 hours, and oh my God, we didn't get paid.
Right. Those days are, and that's great. And there's nothing is going to replace playing in front of an audience. Nothing is going to carry that impact, both for us as players and for listeners, because that's a big thing. I have friends who are kind of still saying stuff like, well, what are you going to do live? What's it going to sound like live? Live. And that, trust me, it bothers me. I'm like, all right, man, we got to go out and at least play a couple times live to really prove this thing. And yet I don't remember anybody ever going, so you made Magical Mystery Tour. How are you going to do that live? No, it was the end product,
Yeah.
It was the recorded product was one thing. The live product was another. We've been really good with the recorded product right now. And the live thing is a variable that we're addressing as we go along. And right now, it still doesn't feel like time to run right out and kiss a bunch of strangers, to be honest with you.
Well, and something else is, like, for instance, I interviewed a band last evening, and they were headed to Colorado for a Sunday show, and they were thinking about, hey, the promoters, offered them to, you can sleep in our house to, for a little bit, and then you guys could go. And they're like, oh no, I think we're just going to get on the road, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you don't have, if you're a really hardworking band, you can put up with that, or you can choose not to.
Right. And believe me, 20 years ago, maybe things would have been different. 30 years ago, whatever it is, things might have been different. It was a different time and a different scene then. But now, look at your biggest bands, even the touring schedules and the recording schedules of your biggest top level bands. You're not out on the 2-year Metallica Black Album tour anymore.
Yes.
Business doesn't work like that anymore. So we have to find our niche in that new business model and make sure, again, at our level, we cannot afford to make dumb moves. We can't afford to make costly moves. We can't afford to go out, and no offense, I don't think we're going to sell out arenas, but we also can't afford to spend 2 weeks of our lives and come home with 35 cents in our pocket and having played to 15 people total. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Divorce papers table.
What's that, Todd?
And divorce papers sitting on the table waiting.
Right.
Well, that too.
Right.
That
and the
too.
locks are changed at home.
There's a lot of musicians that I know that live in different areas. Like, for instance, one blues artist that I know, he lives in St. Louis and he plays around Kansas City and that area, and it's not that big of a drive to come back home the same weekend.
Right.
You're not
Yep.
out for days and days and days on end.
We all know that it's kind of a young man's game, and it's also, you have to, if you're going to deliver that high end product night after night, you have to be getting some rest. You have to be taking care of yourself. I was out on the road years ago as a, and it's no secret, I don't, as a active alcoholic at the time. And Todd will tell you, I struggled to manage because I had to manage the gig, the hangover, the travel, I had to repair the relationships I'd damaged the night before with my bandmates because I was drunk and careless. All that stuff makes it difficult. And I think at our age now, we just can't afford to have it be that difficult, But I think it can happen. I do think it can happen, and we are doing everything in our power to make it happen.
I think that's right now. John lives in Michigan, and I live down in Florida, so logistics aren't really in our favor for, meeting up down the road and doing a gig. We could maybe meet you in Nashville or something, but...
Right, which we talked about hubbing out of the city or something.
Can't really get together for band rehearsal, tomorrow.
So, what's been the reception to your music online?
I think overwhelmingly positive, like I said, overwhelmingly positive. I don't know if that's a great term. We found an audience, and that's all our expectations were fairly low, meaning we're realistic. We weren't making outrageous demands of a record label. There's still people who, are living this fantasy where they think they get a record label, and that record label is going to give them $1 million and send a jet to pick them up. We didn't do that. We didn't have that. Because we've been doing it so long, we're smart. We work really smart, and we found an audience, which is all we wanted to do. Like I said, we just wanted to find people who liked the kind of music we liked, so we could make some new songs for them to listen to. And that's exactly what's happened.
That's great.
And it's been, we found a pretty good international audience for ourselves, that's, what more can you ask for? It's cool for Todd and I to make these songs up and listen to them and tell each other how cool we are, but it's a little better when someone else is able to listen and go, I like that, or I hear, ooh, I'm a big fan of this band, and I can hear some of that in there. That's by design. That's what we do. We want to process our influences and come out with a product that not only pays homage to those influences, but gives you something fresh as well. And we found an audience for it, which is the biggest blessing in the world. I can't tell you how thankful we are.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I would love to, at some stage of the game, the next couple weeks, have you guys back on, and we just play, each song, and then get your guys' thoughts on it. I think that would be really cool.
We would love that, man. And, what you're doing, again, folks like you, what you're doing for folks like us is how this whole thing started to begin with. If you go back to, the 50s and the birth of rock and roll and Alan Freed, and that's what it is. That's what you're doing for us, is you're just, helping us expose this music to more people. So we can't thank you enough for your time or thank your audience enough.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I definitely look forward to having you guys on sometime next couple weeks, and
Cool.
we just go down the list of this music that I've got here, and we just play, a couple songs, get your guys' thoughts on each of the songs and kind of the production process and some of the different things behind it. I think it would be really cool.
We'd love to do it anytime.
Well, I will definitely be in touch. Thanks for doing this, guys. Thanks for coming on and chatting with me today.
Brother, thank you so much.
You guys are great. There they go. That is Ghosts of Sunset. And they join us today here on our big broadcast. And I am trying to do 65 different things at once. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. So, I am going to attempt to move these files so I can play these files. But whatever. So, that wraps it up here today from 990 WBOB, also iHeartRadio, AMFM247.com, as well as many others. Check us out on the mix on Tuesday.